Welcome back to Hitchcock's and the barn. And following the overwhelming success of the first video, we thought we'd like to give you the backstory as to how this collection came about, how we purchased it and ultimately shipped it back to the UK. If you take a look around me, you'll see now that we've organised the bikes into groups, and around the room we've got all the fuel tanks hung on the wall to enable us to marry those up to both the bikes and the frames. And you'll also notice there are a few gaps where we've actually sold some of these bikes. So we thought it'd be a great opportunity today to give you that story. So the story started a few years ago when we opened discussions with a guy called Bob Michalak. He's probably better known as BSA Bob. And initially Bob was interested in selling some of the Royal Enfield parts of his business. Bob was known from the 1960s as an importer and seller of British brand motorcycles, which included Royal Enfield, and unfortunately, while all of this discussion was taking place, Bob fell ill and subsequently passed. Sometime later, Bob's widow, Corky, contacted us and asked if we were interested in purchasing the whole collection. And then, unfortunately, COVID came along and everything got put on hold again. That was until November 2021, when Alan Hitchcock was able to hop on an aircraft and fly over to Michigan, where he was able to speak to Bob's son, Max, and open discussions again, this time for the whole collection. If we then fast forward on to July 2022, when a team of 4 people was assembled from Hitchcock's and flew out to Michigan to start the initial process of how these bikes were going to come back into the UK. The barn itself was situated in a little bit of a remote location with a little bit of difficulty to get big articulated lorries with sea containers in there from the road to the barn. In America they're known as semis, we know them as articulated lorries, and obviously one of the first jobs to do was to build a track that would take these lorries and able to get them into position outside the barn. To put that in perspective, the logistics of getting American semi-trucks across a couple of fields, through dips, over hills, to get them positioned near to the barns with sea containers on was a logistical nightmare, which we did manage to overcome. On entering the barn in Onstead, Michigan, the first thing you're presented with is just this whole array of motorcycles and bits. On the top floor there were motorcycles, frames and wheels. On the bottom floor there were absolute masses of parts. There were engines, gearboxes, half engines, a whole host of things that had to be somehow logistically put together to get them into these sea containers. Thankfully, there were a number of locals who were also able to crucially lend a hand to make this all possible. The first task was to set a winch up to be able to winch down the motorcycles from the second floor. And once these were out, along with the frames, we were able to lay those on the grass and take a view of how they would go into the sea containers. In terms of sea containers, there were initially 4, and logistically, to book semis to attend this barn was also a logistical nightmare too. So we had to look at the best way of fitting these products into these sea containers. The initial plan was to book a sea container for each day, but timescales were tight and bookings were difficult, so we ended up having to do that over 2 days with 4 containers, double-decked, crammed with British motorcycles and parts. I said that the neighbours lent a crucial hand in packing all these bikes. A special mention must go to a fella called Franklin, who regaled everybody with stories of the motorcycles that Bob had from the 60s and kept everybody well entertained with quite a difficult task of packing these containers. With the job seemingly completed, one last task was to get the American semis, our articulated lorries, back across a couple of fields, through the dip, negotiate the obstacles and back onto the highway. And so 8 weeks later, we welcome back the shipment of the sea containers back into the Midlands and ultimately into this barn, which is where you see them today. I think a statement that will live with all of us was on Alan's return in the July of 2022. He said that upon opening the barn doors and realising the sheer volume of motorcycles and parts, that at that point, if he hadn't have already paid for the collection, he felt that he could very easily have walked away. So, if you've been paying attention so far, you'll note that I've only mentioned 4 sea containers. There is, however, a 5th sea container which contained all of these, which is a whole host of Royal Enfield motorcycles, ranging from complete machines right the way through to project bikes, covering Furies, Westerners, Fire Arrows, Interceptors, Bullets, a whole array of our bikes, and they're all here for sale. The great news is those of you that have visited the website will have now realised that we've managed to get the bikes into some sort of order and they're starting to appear there, and more crucially for us, they're now starting to sell. So far, so good. We've managed to catalogue some of the motorcycles, although that is still a task to do, but more importantly, behind me, we've got this mountain of parts. And we did say in the previous video that it was going to be a labour of love to wade through these and to get these catalogued and available for sale. And that is going to take some time. But trust me, they will be coming to market. Keep your eyes on the Hitchcock's website, and we will be releasing them through other areas like eBay. But the first connection, Hitchcock's website. I would, however, add to that last comment, if you are looking for individual parts, please bear with us. Just taking a quick look behind us, it is a mammoth task to wade through these parts, but trust me, we're on it and we will do everything in our power to get those parts ready and available for sale to you.